Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public, and welcome to North Northamptonshire Planning Committee North today, Wednesday the 17th of January 2024. And please note that this meeting is being live streamed via the North Northants YouTube channel, and I welcome those joining us online. Can I please request that mobile phones are set to silent or switched off for the duration of the meeting? I will call all speakers and I'll introduce them by name prior to them speaking, and I'll just go through the planning protocol. So firstly, I'll ask the officer to introduce the report and provide any updates. The officer will then give his report presentation to members. I'll then call speakers in order that they are presented on the speaker list. I will state the recommendations for the purpose of debate and seek a seconder, and then members will debate the item on the agenda, and then we'll move to the vote, after which I will state the decision that has come forward and been voted on. So can we move to agenda item 1, apologies for non-attendance, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Watts, Councillor Brown and Councillor Shacklock, with Councillor Jelly acting as a substitute.
Thank you, Councillor Jelly, for standing in. Agenda item 2, members' declarations of interest. Have members got any declarations they haven't declared yet? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of December 2023. I'd like to move those as a true and correct record of the meeting. Is there a seconder? Councillor Carter. Does anybody have any comments on the accuracy? No? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. That then takes us to agenda item 4. I'd like to propose agenda item 4 as amended on the officer update sheet. Sorry, I'd like to propose the recommendations as shown on the update sheet. So do I have a seconder for that? And reserve the right to speak. Thank you. So now I'll open that up for debate. Oh, sorry. I've just read out my and quickly forgotten them. So I'll move to officer. Pete Bache, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks full permission for the erection of 50 dwellings with associated open space, parking, landscaping and access on the land to the rear of the cemetery on Stoke Door Road, Oundle. And it's brought before members this evening because it falls outside of the council's scheme of delegation, as it has received more than 5 relevant neighbour objections and an objection from the town council. So here is the site location plan showing the extent of the site. Access is proposed to be solely from Stoke Doyle Road to the south. From the plan you can identify the properties on Clifton Drive to the north and Warren Bridge to the east. To the west and south of the site is open countryside. So here's a site layout showing 50 homes on the site. The housing mix can be found in paragraph 2.4 of the committee report. The topography of the site is a key feature of this site, as the land rises from Stoke Doyle Road in the south to a crest approximately halfway across the site before falling again down towards the brook in the north. As such, the majority of housing is located on the flatter part of the centre of the site, with 2 rows of housing positioned down the northern slope. No housing is proposed on the southern field due to its open countryside aspect. Any housing in this location is considered to cause significant harm to the openness of the countryside. It's worth noting at this point that the layout of the scheme has undergone numerous amendments due to the significant constraint of the potential for severe harm on the character and appearance of the countryside. The applicants revised the scheme and reduced the housing numbers to overcome this issue to end up with a scheme that the local planning authority is satisfied with in terms of its relationship with the rural area. In terms of materials, the applicant is proposing a high quality palette of Forticrete stone and cream and buff facing bricks. This is to tie in with the dominant colour of buff type material in the immediate surrounding area and the wider town of Oundle. The dwellings identified in blue are those positioned in key vistas. These will have the stone appearance, whilst those identified in yellow and red will consist of a mix of cream and buff materials with a mixture of grey and rustic red roofs. Here's a plan showing the tenure split. The development is proposing 22% affordable housing, which equates to 11 dwellings. Of these 11 dwellings, 8 are proposed to be rent, with 3 of shared ownership. Whilst the provision of 22% affordable housing is less than the policy requirement, a viability assessment has been submitted and independently assessed. The outcome of the viability assessment is that the scheme breaks even at 22% provision, and no further affordable housing is viable on the site. This is due to a mixture of the required costs involved in the off-site highway works, abnormal foundation requirements and earthworks due to the topography of the site, and surface and foul water drainage costs. In terms of material planning evaluation of the proposal, a thorough assessment has been conducted and is outlined in section 7 of the committee report from page 17 right through to page 33. If I were to repeat everything, we'd be here all night, so I'm going to do a summary on each section. Firstly, the principle of development is established through the allocation of the site in the policy EN21 of the Local Plan Part 2, which was adopted in December 2023. As such, full weight should be given to this policy. In terms of the impacts of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area, as touched upon earlier, the site is located in a very sensitive location on the very edge of the town. There is open countryside to the west and south, and the development would represent the first development to take place to the west of the cemetery, which itself has a very mature and established landscape setting. It was critical for the success of the scheme to manage the interaction between the built form and the countryside effectively. The settlement edge has historically been screened when approaching from the west by a significant landscape boundary containing a number of mature trees, which is present along the edge of the cemetery. To prevent intrusive development in the open countryside and to limit a hard edge of built form, all built development was removed from the southern field. This was considered essential as any development here would cause significant harm to the openness of the countryside and severely erode the soft edge of the settlement. Due to the quite significant rise in land level, the front section of the site would have been very visible and harmful to the open countryside. On the contrary, the main rectangular section to the north of the site is relatively out of view from Stoke Door Road and the approach into Oundle, and was considered the most appropriate location for the bulk of the built form. The southern field now contains the access road, open space, play area and cemetery extension alongside soft landscaping. With the built development on the northern crest of the site, it provides an opportunity to be relatively well contained and screened with existing well-established hedgerows, which will be complemented through further new tree and hedgerow planting. It's therefore considered that the overall form and location development on the northern section of the site behind the existing hedgerow is the most suitable location for the development and has the least impact on the countryside. Overall, it's considered that the proposal respects the character and appearance of the area and is therefore acceptable in this regard. With regard to impacts on residential amenity, it must be remembered that the site is allocated for housing in the Local Plan Part 2 and has gone through a full consultation and adoption process. In fact, the site was initially put forward as a housing allocation by Oundle Town Council themselves in their draft neighbourhood plan that never made it through to adoption. The development of the site would undoubtedly alter the outlook for a number of dwellings on Clifton Drive, from rural countryside views to views of an urban housing development. Whilst it's understood that this is a considerable change in outlook to what the residents have previously enjoyed, given that this is an allocated site and on the balance of probability, residential development was always likely to come forward at some point in the future. Furthermore, outlook is not a material planning consideration. In terms of the relationship of the development with the properties on Clifton Drive, separation distances from the property to property range from approximately 50 to 80 metres. There is also a dense, well-established landscape boundary running along the watercourse in the form of structural tree and hedgerow vegetation. It's considered that the layout and landscaping proposals address the neighbour relationship, and whilst it's not contested that there will be some impacts on the amenity of some properties on Clifton Drive, this is considered to be low level and typical of a normal urban residential relationship, such as infrequent light impacts, noise impacts, and possibly some minor potential overlooking at longer distances. In terms of other identified properties on Warren Bridge and the chapel, it's considered that there will be no significant impacts on their amenity due to separation distances and orientation. In regard to highway safety and parking, this scheme proposes a single access off Stokedale Road. The proposal requires significant improvements to the highway in this area, including the movement of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit to pass the site and significant improvements to Warren Bridge with signalised crossing proposed and traffic lights to provide safer vehicular and pedestrian movements across this blind bridge. The highway improvements are considered to provide a wider benefit to the area and not just those on the site. Internally, the road layout is practical and allows for bin lorry and fire engine movements. 183 parking spaces were provided across the site, which equates to over 3 spaces per property if this is averaged out. This is considered to be acceptable. Therefore, subject to the identified highway improvements, the proposal is considered to provide suitable and safe access to the site. It's considered that no significant material highway safety harm has been identified by the local highway authority, and the proposal is considered to be acceptable in this regard. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the lead local flood authority and Anglian Water have reviewed the details contained within a flood risk assessment and have no objection to the acceptability of the proposed surface water drainage scheme, subject to a number of conditions contained in the report. It's noted that Oundle Town Council and neighbours have objected and concerns about flood risk and drainage. However, the development of the site and the implementation of the proposed surface water drainage works would provide a betterment to the current drainage situation and should therefore reduce the risk of flooding or other surface water drainage problems. In terms of ecology, the applicant has demonstrated a net gain in on-site biodiversity and no objections have been received by the wildlife officer, subject to a number of standard ecological conditions. In terms of ecological impact, the one thing to draw members' attention to is the Wildlife Trust comments. There is a presence of a population of a rare plant called wild clary that's located within the verge of the road, which is Stokedale Road. The Wildlife Trust have agreed with the applicant's ecologist to a translocation strategy for these plants. The translocation strategy would effectively relocate this section of verge that may contain the wild clary into another part of the site, thus attempting to save any wild clary which may be present in this section of the verge. The North Northants Wildlife Officer acknowledges the wild clary species, but confirms that it is not a Section 41 species under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, and therefore is not afforded any special protection. In this instance, the translocation strategy is considered to be a suitable approach to mitigate this harm. In terms of ecology, the application site is on the western side of Oundle. Bronze Age burials have been reportedly found in the cemetery, and remains of a Saxon settlement were found during development to the east. On this basis, a condition will be attached to any consent to secure full investigation of the area for Saxon activity. In terms of plan obligations, the heads of terms are set out in section 7.9 of the committee report and indicate the contributions sought for the likes of education, health, libraries and open space provision, all of which are to be paid in full as requested to mitigate the impact of the development on the wider community. I've just got a few photographs of the site for those that haven't been on there. This is the southern field looking up from Stokedale Road. This is looking down that southern fields. This is where the access road would be coming up from Stoke Door Road. This is at the top of the site where it's flattest, and then the photo on the right is looking down the site towards Clifton Drive. This is along the bottom of the site, which shows the boundary treatment between the site and the properties on Clifton Drive. And this is looking back up the site from the bottom, just to show you the kind of steepness of the site. We should move on again. Currently, this is a site entrance, so this is just a screen grab from Street View. And the visuals from the CGI which were submitted, which show what the access would look like from Stoke Door Road. This is the streets in at the moment coming into Oundle, so you can see the openness and how rural the entrance is, with the properties up at the top of the hill there on the crest. So in conclusion, the proposal is considered to be on balance acceptable and is not considered to cause significant harm that would outweigh the economic, social and environmental benefits of the proposal. Therefore, given the current policy position, the recommendation is one of approval as set out in section 10 of the committee report with the amendments as listed on the update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll now call speakers forward to speak to the committee. The first name I have on the list is Sue Heaney, a third-party objector. If you'd like to come and take a seat. And when you're ready, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm a resident on Clifton Drive, and I'd first like to state my disappointment that the developers have completely disregarded objections or comments from residents that have been raised. The impact of the development on Clifton Drive has been described as unfortunate, but any suggestions from residents to mitigate the effect, for example by changing the orientation of the houses, has been ignored. The layout shows that the densest area of the housing development has been placed at the closest proximity to the existing properties on the southwestern end of Clifton Drive. This means that the development will have the maximum negative visual impact on current residents. With a little thought, surely this could have been improved. This will result in Clifton Drive residents being severely overlooked and exposed with a major loss of privacy. The houses rising in front will effectively be tiered and will all have a sight line directly into our gardens and property. As to the suggestion that this could be eased by a 2-metre fence or hedging, to start with, the houses along the brook in Clifton Drive are open to the field due to a restrictive covenant on the land that prevents us from enclosing our gardens. I can't stress enough that the steepness of the land is at the forefront of these objections. The report also states that the applicant is proposing significant structural landscaping. Due to the topography of the site, the current saplings near Clifton Drive mentioned will not have any significant benefit, and I would suggest that they should consider planting larger semi-mature specimen trees throughout the development, which would mitigate its impact. Finally, the value of the northern boundary as a wildlife corridor has been continually overlooked. The proposal still does not contain adequate provision to protect this valuable corridor from the adverse impact of the development. Along the brook and green corridor, a variety of wildlife has been observed: deer, hedgehogs, hares, woodpeckers, sparrowhawks, and I would suggest as a minimum requirement that the planning authority insists that the developer plant a hawthorn hedge or similar along the entire length of the brook. This would provide shelter and food to our valuable bird population and pollen and nectar for insects. Hawthorn hedging would also have the added benefit of discouraging children from accessing the brook, which poses a huge attraction and potential hazard. Thank you.
Can you just stay there in case any councillors have any questions of clarification? None? Thank you very much. Can I ask Jeff Cox to take a seat? Thank you. Again, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Jeff Cox. I live on Wood Lane. It's just a few hundred yards down from the development on the Stokedale Road. It's a tough challenge, actually, in a few words, to save somebody's life or prevent serious injury in just a few minutes. These development proposals, as they're presented, and the related sections 7 and 11 in the officer's report of the 17th of January are substantially unsafe as they relate to highways, pedestrian safety and sustainability. This development and associated highways amendments will result in gridlock at peak traffic times and unacceptably increased safety risks, particularly to children, pedestrians and those with mobility issues. This transport statement that has been done by the developers is built on sand and is inadequate in how it proposes to mitigate highway and pedestrian issues. Firstly, it's based on outdated data from 2017, which in particular does not take account of a significant change in traffic flows that have occurred since the installation of traffic lights at the Barnwell junction of the A605, which now pushes a significant rat run traffic onto the Stokedale Road, particularly at peak times. Also, the planning approval is not included in any of these assessments for the Little Wellies Nursery, just located past Wood Lane. With only 30 children, this nursery already is increasing traffic flow at the peak times by around 120 to 140 cars, which classes are going to expand there, so those numbers could easily double or triple in the future, which makes the modelling unsafe in the reports that we've had, and in fact would put the numbers above the 2031 numbers that have been forecasted. Secondly, this transport statement uses carefully selected benchmarking baseline data from other towns, and Northamptonshire was not representative of Oundle. It significantly underestimates the number of commuters that will live in this development if passed, and the number of car journeys. Ask anybody in Oundle and they will tell you that close on 100% of the residents in this proposed development will not find a job in Oundle and will commute, not what you find in the modelling. Thirdly, the proposed traffic lights and pedestrian crossing at Warren Bridge will create a backup of traffic because of these problems with the modelling, which without any double yellow lines effectively becomes a single track road. This happens even today at times when we get the A605 closed. It only creates mayhem for motorists, but actually becomes a death trap for pedestrians and cyclists, and goodness help anybody on a mobility scooter. The design of the current pedestrian lights at Warren Bridge is also dangerous, especially when approached from the west. The pavement is not only narrow, has a high wall at the rear, but it's also oblique to the road. I urge you to look at that. This design almost makes it impossible for a person on a mobility scooter or a wheelchair or a pedestrian with a pram to press the button without sticking into the road. This is about people's lives. I would challenge any person in the room to feel comfortable standing on this side when the articulated lorries that are going to go onto this site.
Come to a close?
The drawings in the appendices of the transport statement show that it's possible for a lorry to pass.
Mr. Cox, everyone has 3 minutes to speak, and everyone is invited to speak, and it's unfair on others if I give someone 5 minutes and everyone else 3. Can you please show respect, please, to this committee? I've asked you to close your speak. We have read the report. All members should have read the report, and we are very happy to listen. I've allowed 5 speakers, objectors. Normally, it would only be 3. Thank you. Could I ask Ms. David Gooder, please, to come forward and speak? Thank you. Again, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
I wish to deal with 2 interrelated issues. I'm a chartered civil engineer with over 35 years' experience of water and wastewater engineering. Although these are my comments, they've been agreed with a neighbour, John Grubb, who's also a very experienced civil engineer and was an advisor to the Environment Agency. Firstly, I want to talk about flooding from the Lyveden Brook and the location of adjacent infrastructure. This is not discharge of water from the site. The flood model has not been calibrated or validated by the lead local flood authority. This was a recommendation made by JBA, the consultants who did the modelling. Until calibrated and validated, open channel hydraulic models are notoriously unreliable. The flood lines generated can only be considered as a theoretical estimation. They have been treated by the developer as absolutely accurate. The impact is that the real flood levels could well encroach on the toe of the road and lagoon embankments, restricting forward flows with consequential flooding to properties upstream, damage to the infrastructure and pollution of the watercourse. Where significant uncertainties exist, as in this case, it's good practice to include a factor of safety. No factor of safety has been applied here. Getting the location of any infrastructure wrong will be impossible to correct. Emphasising the need for a factor of safety, the potential effects of global warming make this even more the case. I recommend that the Council requires an appropriate factor of safety to be applied to all modelling predictions and that all infrastructure be located outside of the resulting flood risk area. Next, I want to talk about the design and future maintenance of the lagoon. The proposed lagoon design is not to a standard that would allow adoption by Anglian Water. By implication, it is to a lesser standard and has several potential problems. The side slopes are steep, making them difficult to maintain. The northern embankment is in effect a dam. It's very narrow and subject to drying out cracking. This would make it unstable after a long dry spell. The freeboard proposed in the design is very low. The embankment will settle with time, reducing freeboard and putting it at risk of overtopping. Overtopping of an earth embankment is one of the reservoir engineer's worst nightmares, as catastrophic failure follows very quickly. A large sudden release of water will have consequences downstream at Warren Bridge, which don't bear thinking about. As proposed, the control mechanism for the lagoon outflow will become submerged at times of flooding, increasing the risk of overtopping. Good long-term management of the lagoon is essential if it is to function as designed. The Council need to ensure this will be available, even if the present commercial organisations no longer exist. I urge the Council to reject the Northern Flood Storage Lagoon in its present location and as currently designed. It should be designed to an adoptable standard which would have greater freeboard, flatter side slopes, making it more stable and easier to maintain. I would also make adoption by Anglian Water much easier if that became necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to answer? If there are any members have any items of clarification they want to make? No, thank you very much, Mr. Gooder.
Can I make one point, please? Just one quick one. There are 2 flood aspects here. One is the brook and one is runoff from the side. This is about the brook, not runoff from the side. Thank you.
Thank you. This is all in the report. Thank you. Can I ask Alex Wood-Davis? Thank you. Again, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Oh. I will. Apologies. I could hear myself. There had to be one. It had to be me. Okay. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm being heard this time. My name's Alex Wood-Davis and I'm a resident of Clifton Drive. As a resident of Oundle Town and a taxpayer of North Northamptonshire, I've been so saddened having read so many objections about the true impact of this development that it will have on our beautiful town that I've been moved to speak to you today. Oundle Town Council, on our behalf, articulated the views of the town following a packed town meeting where the community, yes, the community, voiced their concerns as to what was proposed on top of what had already been passed or already under development in Oundle and the pressures this development would have on our infrastructure. Having previously worked in a planning role, I know that any parcel of land can be considered for building if it meets a planning requirement, but Oundle has already fulfilled its obligations with other sites in the town up to 2031. David Wilson Homes, a developer of considerable resource, would appear to be able to use its power and influence in shaping our area without any concern for how the changes will affect the residents. We've been overwhelmed by the amount of documentation provided by DWH, yet they have not been able to satisfy any of our concerns in any meaningful way. Orientation of the proposed dwellings, DWH have just ignored us. They've been more concerned, as have NNC planners, of houses being viewed from open countryside than the deleterious effects of existing residents of those dwellings looking directly into people's bedrooms and private gardens, even suggesting we consider erecting a 2-metre high fence. If any of the planning committee had had the opportunity to stand at the top of Bennefield Road and look down Clifton Drive, you will have seen when viewing the proposed development plan, due to the topography of the land, 21 properties on the proposed development will be above the existing building line. Even a 10-metre fence would not provide privacy to my bedroom or garden, let alone a 2-metre high one. There needs to be more affordable homes for our young people to get on the property ladder, yet here we have the prospect of 22% and not 40% of affordable homes, which will not fulfil the need for those who would like to remain in the town in an affordable way. Planning conditions will not control this build. The Cotterstock Road development has seen dozens of enforcement complaints, none of which would appear to have been addressed due to the under-resourcing of the planning enforcement function within North Northants. We are asking for a level playing field. If members of the public are not able to shape their own communities, then the onus is on you as a planning committee to do the ethical and morally right thing and refuse this application. It will not benefit the people of Oundle in any way, shape or form. It will destroy a beautiful part of our town and countryside. My plea is please oppose this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That was spot on, 3 minutes, so thank you. Would you mind just waiting for a while to see if members have, any members have anything they want to clarify? No, thank you very much. And finally, can I ask Mark Quigley, the final third-party objector? Thank you. Again, when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
My comments relate to the plans to modify the road over the bridge itself, not from a safety point of view, but focusing on the issue of flooding caused by the bridge, which has not been considered. You have a unique opportunity to reduce the flooding with a simple, low-cost solution which can be implemented easily at the time of carrying out the proposed work on the road. I've lived in Warren Bridge for 35 years, and the flooding problem was a once-in-10-year event, but is now an annual occurrence due to the bridge arch itself, which simply cannot cope with the volume of water and which backs up. In times of heavy rain, the bridge and the adjacent stone wall in effect act as a dam, exacerbating the flooding. 2 weeks ago, 6 properties along the stream were surrounded by water. 1 was flooded, 2 had flooding in their garages, and the road either side of the bridge was impassable for a number of hours. Some properties have now been flooded 4 times in 25 years. According to the Historic England website, and contrary to popular belief, the bridge is not listed and has no historic significance. Therefore, there is no reason not to carry out this improvement. In 1998, the weight of floodwater knocked down part of the stone wall. The collapse of the wall saved many houses in Warren Bridge from flooding and continues to do so. Rebuilding this wall, as has been suggested, without mitigating measures would condemn more houses to flooding. As part of the developer's plan, the roadway over the bridge will be modified substantially. It would be very easy to add a series of 1 metre plastic pipes running from the upstream field under the road and exiting in the field downstream to provide extra capacity. A civil engineer, Chris Jennison, with 40 years' experience in roads and bridges and a former MD of AECOM, URS and Scott Wilson, has estimated the cost at between £10,000 and £15,000. Not only will this help to reduce flooding to the houses in Warren Bridge, but to the actual Stoke Doyle Road itself. Not to take this opportunity while working on the road over the bridge would be very short-sighted and detrimental to the interests of the local community. It would also be an excellent way of spending Section 106 money, or perhaps as a gesture of goodwill by the developer. Thank you.
Do any members have any points of clarification they want to ask? No. Thank you very much. Could I ask Nick Coley, who's the agent for the applicant, to speak? I believe you're going to take 3 minutes, and I'm going to give are you happy with that? And then 12 minutes for the agent to make it fair. Thank you.
Sure. From Wormald Burrows, we are the engineering consultant that worked on the flood risk assessment and the sort of roads and drainage elements of the scheme. We also worked with JBA consultants who did flood modelling for Livenden Brook. The reason we use JBA is because they work for the Environment Agency and they produce a lot of the UK's flood mapping. So they have a good understanding of flood risk, and their work is usually not questioned particularly, but it is sort of looked at very closely by the Environment Agency. Have you seen the drainage scheme for the site works with the topography? You've identified that there's a ridge in the centre of the site, so water will flow to the north and to the south, but the majority of the housing is on the crest of the hill, and the drainage for that predominantly goes to the north and into the attenuation basin, sort of in the northeast corner. But also all of the roads and driveways are constructed of permeable paving, so they themselves will also provide storage and treatment to the water so that the water quality is maintained. The flood modelling took into account the bridge, took into account structures upstream and downstream, which the Environment Agency's previous modelling didn't take into account because it's more broad scale than that. So it took into account all of those structures. And one of the biggest elements of the flood risk issue is actually backing up from the Nene rather than Livenden Brook itself having issues. It's the backing up from the Nene, so effectively the flows from Livenden Brook hit the Nene and have nowhere to go. That's an aspect that can't particularly be changed, but what we can do is reduce the runoff, which is what we've done. So the contributing water to Livenden Brook will be reduced by the development because we're restricting all flows to what is the equivalent of a 1 in 1 year flow. So when you have the 1 in 2 year, 1 in 5 year, 1 in 10, all the larger storm events, the flows from the site will be restricted back to the 1 in 1 year rate. So there will be a reduction and reduced impact on Livenden Brook and the surrounding properties as a result of that. That's one of the biggest aspects of the drainage scheme that will provide benefits to the local area and to this issue of flooding, which I know is quite understandably sensitive for surrounding neighbours of the site. I don't know if there's anything else that I need to cover on the drainage side of things. I think that's it for me.
Thank you. Can I ask you just to stay put for a while and see if members have any points of clarification they want to ask? Councillor Best.
One of the earlier speakers mentioned about the suitability of the attenuation basin. I don't know if you feel you're in a position to comment on that or not.
Yeah, the attenuation basin has been designed in accordance with the Syria SUDS manual, which is what we have to use as a guiding document. There's nothing about the attenuation basin that wouldn't make it adoptable by Anglian Water, so we will talk to Anglian Water about its adoption. If for whatever reason Anglian Water don't take it forward, it will be maintained by a management company who will then look after it. But in terms of its structure and its construction, there's nothing there that wouldn't make it adoptable. We have no concerns about the structural stability of the basin, so there shouldn't be any issues in regard to that either.
Any further members? Thank you very much. Thank you. And can I ask Pritesh Shah, and I'll allow you 12 minutes to balance the objectives with those. So you probably don't need 12 minutes, but when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and members for giving me the chance to speak in support of our application tonight. The scheme in front of you has gone through an extensive consultation and changes, resulting in a layout that has the support from officers and specialist consultees. It should be noted that the site also benefits from an allocation in the local plan. The application before you seeks permission for 50 new homes and a cemetery extension, providing a mix of 2 to 5 bedroom housing, including 2 custom-built dwellings, 2 bungalows, and 1 fully wheelchair compliant dwelling. We are delivering 22% affordable housing, which, as Pete mentioned, equates to 11 affordable homes. We do realise this is under the policy position. However, this application has been subject to a viability review due to the technical constraints and has been independently assessed by the Council's viability assessor with no concerns. The viability does, however, allow us to provide over £124,000 towards early years services, over £237,000 towards education, and over £25,000 towards local health services, just to name a few. We'll also be providing real-time bus service information to the bus stops on Benefield Road, and we'll be offering bus vouchers to new residents, which will be provided through the Section 106. The site will connect to the existing footpath on Stokedale Road, which for a section of the footpath will be upgrading. This will result in a continuous pedestrian access to Oundle Town Centre and will include a dedicated pedestrian crossing point over the Warren Bridge, which will be controlled by traffic lights. This will ensure pedestrian safety and ensure the safety of people with mobility issues. We're also proposing speed restriction measures on Stokedale Road, which has been agreed by the local Highways Authority, and this will be cemented as part of the Section 278 process. Access to the boundary of the site to the Bearton land to the east is also going to be provided. This will ensure any development coming forward on the Bearton land will be allowed to come forward as per the local plan allocation. In terms of flooding and drainage, the plan application is supported with a comprehensive flood risk assessment, which has been agreed by the LLFA. The flood risk assessment includes a drainage strategy which demonstrates how surface water runoff will be managed to avoid increasing flood risk both on and off the site. And you've just heard from my colleague Nick, who's explained it in a lot more detail than I. The scheme also includes structural landscaping in strategic locations to mitigate against any visual impact for the residents on Clifton Drive. It should be noted that the location of the housing has to follow the contours of the land leading to the layout that we have before us. Members, you should be also reminded and aware that nobody has a right to a view. However, our layout doesn't include any overlooking and does mitigate against residential amenity of the residents on Clifton Drive. Biodiversity is also a key priority for us. Our proposal delivers more than 10% biodiversity net gain, And as Pete also explained, we will be committing to translocating wild clary plants present at the entrance of the site. I hope members can appreciate the collaborative working that we've had with your officers, and which has resulted in this high quality scheme that you have before you. The scheme will help mitigate and meet the strategic housing need for Oundle, and your support on our application is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you to stay for a while, just for questions of clarification from members? Councillor Smith.
Just a simple question. How many consultations have you had with the local residents?
We've had about 3 or 4. We've been to the Oundle Town Council on a number of occasions where residents have been present to answer questions and take questions from members of the public. That's happened about three times.
Can I ask you to be quiet, please? People have had their chance to speak. Please let the speaker speak.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's our consultation.
So how many in total did you say you've had?
About 3 times we've met with the Town Council.
Thank you. And before the local plan was adopted, it would have gone out for consultation. Thank you. Councillor DL.
Hello. Just a quick query, because I was just a little bit confused when I read the pack. Whereabouts is the Bearton land in relation to the site?
Yeah, so if you see where the drainage basin is on the top of the site, you've got an access road which goes to a boundary which almost gets cut off. The Bearton land is opposite that, and it should be noted that they already have a planning in principle for 9 dwellings, I believe. So whilst the local plan allocation includes both our land and the Bearton land, unfortunately we've not been able to come together as one conclusive development, but we are providing that access to the boundary to allow the scheme to come forward comprehensively as per the local plan allocation.
So the access would be through your road into that?
Their site, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So the access will be from Stoke Doyle Road at the south up. Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank
Chair,
you.
just like I said, that obviously hasn't been agreed. So what David Wilson have done is left an unrestricted access here with no ransom strip. However, the Bearton land obviously does adjoin to Warren Bridge, where there is a road that terminates there. And obviously we haven't had an application to agree which way it would come in, but they've just left this route completely open so they can get unrestricted access if need be.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Sims?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Did you say there's no ransom strip there? It's completely open, that access road?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So they've gone straight up to the red line boundary with no strip at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more councillors wanting to ask you any points of clarification, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, the officer recommendation on page 13 of your papers as amended by the update sheet has been moved and seconded for the purpose of debate. All members should have an update sheet on there in front of them. Those updates actually strengthen the conditions, and one has been removed because the approved plans are already contained in condition 3. So I'll open up to members for debate. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a little bit concerned that there's no structural engineer's report on the bridge in regards to traffic, heavy-duty goods going over that. I think really needs a report there for that. That's one. Affordable housing. Is this going to be for the locals only, which would have been nice? And the sewage, is there going to be a secondary pump just in case the first one don't work?
No, so in terms of the bridge, so Warren Bridge, as you're probably aware, at the moment it's kind of public highway unrestricted, so at the moment HGVs can go across that bridge if they wish. I kind of understand your point that construction traffic could potentially be going across this bridge. We have a construction management plan condition, which is number 11, and there's a point in there which is for details to be agreed of a construction route to the site. So if the Highway Authority had any concerns with that bridge, it allows there to be a different route or strengthening of the bridge if they are concerned, but that hasn't been raised by the Highway Authority at this moment.
Chair, can I come back? Can that be done though? Because I think it should be there though, either way. So it should be a report there either way.
The construction management plan.
Yeah, but is that report going to cover that still?
What, a structural survey of the bridge? I don't think it's required or be necessary for this development to do that, because it is currently the public highway which any HGV vehicle can go across the bridge, unfortunately. Sorry, second point was housing. It wouldn't be purely for Arundel residents, as far as I've got a housing officer here with me now, but I think it's confirmed that it would be open to, obviously, people on keyways, so people will be able to bid on the properties. And in terms of the pumping station at the bottom there, this, obviously the scheme in terms of foul water drainage, surface water drainage, has been assessed by our experts at the LLFA, and they're content with the proposals put forward. I'm not an expert on drainage, so in terms of what happens if one foot fails or backs up, we can't request anything more than what the LLFA has agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Jelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've listened to all the comments and everything. There seems to be a significant concern about flooding in around this area. The gentleman who spoke on the flooding said about, mitigating this. The attenuation pond at the top there, is that been put in on the basis of the current situation that we've got with climate change, where we get far more significant levels of rainfall? You're going to get additional runoff from all of these houses going into the attenuation pond. If that breaches that, it goes into the river and it can cause flooding further down. I mean, has that been taken into consideration? And is there any way we could perhaps put a condition on the development to say that the developer needs to put in mitigation against this flooding, similar to what the gentleman said over there about, whether you could get pipes in or something like that, because, you're going to build 50 houses, and if you get really bad weather and people start getting flooded, I mean, it's just not ideal, is it?
Again, as officers, we have to defer to our experts, so the lead local flood authority have fully reviewed all the information put forward. So in terms of their response, they have no concerns with the future life of the scheme and the future in terms of climate change or any potential climate change in terms of runoff. All we know is at present the drainage works done to the site will improve the current greenfield runoff situation, and there is a number of conditions, I think 4 conditions in there, which mean it has to be maintained for the lifetime of the development.
I'll come back through you, Chair. That's the drainage of the site. But how about the impact overall that will go with that? And you've got the brook at the back and the river just down the road. There is a serious problem there with flooding, I think.
So you're saying the drainage of this, because obviously the drainage of the site will be dealt with on site, and then you've got the drainage basin, which would pick up any obviously surface water drainage. So you're saying if anything overflows that into the brook. Obviously the LLFA have come back and have no objection to the site, to the application subject to those conditions. So they're obviously satisfied that that will not be an issue.
Yep, sorry. I think it's the local flood authority are happy. No, I'm afraid you've had... No, I'm sorry. Councillor Best.
I have a more general question initially, which officers might be able to help me with. I've not been involved in planning a great deal of time, but every application that comes forward, I think every application I've heard, is unable to meet our requirements on the percentage of affordable housing. And every major development I'm aware of in the region has failed to meet our target in affordable housing. As a result, there just isn't enough affordable housing. And yet we continue to allow schemes to come forward which are not viable, and we continue to allow them to be built with a less than our target of affordable housing. And even worse, once construction starts, the developer inevitably comes to us and pleads poverty and says because of viability, he can't even deliver the percentage of affordable housing he had in his original proposal. How is it we keep letting schemes like this come forward, which are not needed to meet our housing quota in the area, and do not meet our targets on affordable housing? And add into that the number of, seemingly, seems to me, knowing the area, very valid objections to the development. I don't understand why we keep allowing schemes to come forward like this that don't meet our requirements in so many ways. Can somebody explain to me how and why we do that, please?
It is something that has concerned me, and I have asked, and building costs have shot through the roof, and we do have an independent viability assessor. It's not the council saying, it's not the developer just saying, we do have our own, so I'll pass over to officers.
Yeah, I'd just like to add another thing. I think we've had two kind of significant developments come forward in Arundel in the last few years, and both of those have provided a 40% affordable housing provision, so Codstock Road and St Christopher's Drive. So both of those came in with the 40%. This site, they would, if they could, provide a 40%. It's not that they're not trying to provide the 40%. There's obviously a lot of abnormal costs on this due to the topography of the site. It's an allocation, so it's allocated with that topography. And obviously the significant off-site highway works, which at the moment you've got Warren Bridge, which can be used by all residents. It's kind of a blind bridge. It's got no footpath. Pedestrians kind of have to walk across and gamble if there's a car coming. This proposal obviously provides money and improves that bridge for everybody to use. So it's kind of a balance up between what's required off-site, the abnormal costs on-site, and that's resulted in the 22%. If those costs weren't there, the developer, I'm sure, wouldn't have any issue in providing the 40%.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate and understand all you say, but when I balance the fact that it doesn't meet our targets in that respect, and in how many ways it doesn't meet the needs of the community or the residents around it, I still struggle to understand if a site like this is not viable for all those reasons, then maybe it shouldn't be developed, is the point I'm making.
It is in the local plan, and we did agree, full council agreed that it adopted that local plan in December. So it does carry a lot of weight.
That's right, and it was adopted with those constraints. Yeah.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Returning to the point on flooding, I understand the financial problem, but £15,000 for additional piping just to ease the residents' minds, reduce the dangers of flooding and downstream as well, doesn't seem that excessive. Is there really no way that could be conditioned?
So it hasn't been asked for from any of our consultees. That type of flooding, it would mean that the development isn't actually causing that flooding. I completely understand where residents are coming from and where you're yourself coming from, but we can't condition it because it's not required from the scheme. As a goodwill gesture and things like that outside of planning, we obviously can't control that, but in terms of a condition which is required from this application, it's not necessary.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I understand the concerns of the residents and some of the remarks that have been made and questions asked by members of the committee. But I think we have to remember that we're guided by what's in this report, what's been debated this evening, and the policy that applies to this. And would it been in the local plan, as you've just actually mentioned, Chair, and that carries a lot of weight. If we were to reject this proposal this evening, the developers have the right to go to appeal, which would then cost the council resources, and also they could, if they were to have that upheld, then actually could be awarded to pay their costs. So therefore, I would like to recommend we approve this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor DL.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question actually for the planners. So the houses on the far end where the boundary is, where the hedge boundary is, I think we had two different sort of events tonight. Are they higher than the houses on Clifton Drive? So are those houses on Clifton Drive actually overlooked? Because I think the developer said that they weren't higher than Clifton Drive. And my other question is there any way that some of the concerns of the residents about the aspect of those houses, could that be taken into account as perhaps a condition that the aspect of those houses is turned around so that there isn't that direct looking down or up into the houses on Clifton Drive?
Which houses do you mean? I think to the cursor. So are you talking these ones up here or lower down?
Ones to the north, opposite Clifton.
Those ones. Those ones are probably lower than the. Well, actually, I think they are definitely lower than the properties on Clifton Drive.
The ones.
They will be in terms of the properties, because obviously the Clifton Drive properties, it's almost like this, where it goes back up on the Clifton Drive side. So they would be these ones in particular. These ones in particular here, I don't think there'll be much of a difference between the levels at where their actual houses are and these are. In terms of the gardens, I think these will probably be higher than the gardens down here. Obviously, when you come back up the hill, when you get to around here, these will be higher. But when you stand on the site around about here, you are kind of looking directly into the back of the properties on Clifton Drive, and then their gardens fall lower. In terms of the boundary treatment, I mean, probably the worst time of the year. Was on site very recently this week, and the landscaping is quite good for winter time, for January, February time. There are gaps in the landscaping, as in the existing landscaping, so you kind of can see through. A lot of the properties have obviously enjoyed these open aspects, so there are quite a few kind of bifold doors and kind of patio areas out at a higher level than the gardens, because you step down to the gardens. So obviously this would change. As acknowledged in the report, there will be impacts on the residential amenity, but none kind of more so than you'd experience in a normal kind of urban setting where you are surrounded by housing. In fact, when you're looking at 50 to 80 metre separation distances, you're kind of in kind of more urban areas, you're lucky to get 21 to 30 metres, aren't you, in terms of separation distances. So it's not that we don't sympathise with the residents here. The outlook will change. You do get filtered views through. A way to try and mitigate those filtered views is a landscape condition that I think is condition number 6. So we can still agree more structural landscaping. We can agree tree planting and specific tree species as well. We've got a tree officer in post that we would get involved on that kind of condition discharge to try and plant. As you can see here, they've kind of indicatively indicated trees planted around here, but we can look for kind of trees that will keep green all year round and filter views through. There's also elements of street trees as well, which the MPPF encourages, that we'd also try to get as part of a landscaping condition.
Councillor Marks.
Yes, I recall that there was also a request for hawthorn hedging as opposed to a different form of hedging. I have some experience of different forms of hedge from many years in the leisure industry and park industry, which I'm not presently working in, so there's no conflict of interest. Hawthorn hedging would be preferable to keep young children away from the brook. It would be of no additional expense to the developer, so I don't see why not.
Yeah, that's not a problem to relay back. So part of the condition discharge, all of the landscaping would essentially be up for grabs because it's notwithstanding the submitted plans. We can look at the whole of the landscaping on the site. So obviously we'd have hawthorn hedging if that's appropriate, as well as taller kind of structural trees as well.
Oh, excuse me, thank you. Councillor Dell, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments on the specimen trees and hawthorns. If we can condition that, that would be great. I note that there are 183 car parking spaces for 50 properties, but then there's a biodiversity net gain of 13%. I know 10% is the minimum, but I feel that we should be aiming a lot higher than the minimum 10%, and perhaps we don't need that many spaces for 50 properties, and some of that space could be moved to increase the BNG. That's just a comment. I've got great concern that the peak traffic flow data was from 2017 and isn't up to date. That was mentioned by one of the speakers. I don't know if we've got later traffic flow modelling that could be used. I note that the Wildlife Trust in the report, shall I carry on or do you want to come back? No. Okay, the Wildlife Trust, it was mentioned in the report about the wild clary and the translocation. However, they did, in their objection, mention, and I quote, translocation is less than ideal as it is often not successful and it is not our preferred option. That wasn't in the report, but I just felt it was key to note that. And also, and I think the gentleman's point about the flooding was that the lead local flood authority had not signed off on the brook flooding, as opposed to, obviously in the report it talks about the potential flooding from the site itself, but doesn't take into account the actual flooding from the brook. I think I'm correct there. I'm not sure, however, if the flooding from outside this site is actually taken into account or can be taken into account in this application. I'm sure you can confirm that. And it's also concerning that he mentioned that the SUDS is not to an adoptable standard by Anglian Water. However, I note that the agent said it is, so I'm just wondering who is actually correct there.
Whereabouts is the not adoptable?
So the gentleman there that said it's not adoptable by the Anglian Water, and he seemed to
one of the speakers said it wasn't. But if we go to condition 28, that's been strengthened in the recommendations. Would you like to come back on any?
Yeah, come back on it. So in terms of net gain, at the moment, the developers, from when this was submitted, they only have to provide an enhancement, so they only have to provide 1%. They're doing 13, so it's well and above what they need to do. In terms of traffic flow data, again, I'm not a highways expert. It's been assessed by our experts, so I have to trust their response in terms of the data they've looked at. They won't be looking at any data that they aren't allowed to look at to assess the scheme on, essentially. In terms of the Wildlife Trust, in my report in 7.75, I do obviously state that the Wildlife Trust have objected to the proposal. It is obviously unfortunate that this wild clary, which is, I think it's a very rare plant, I think it's probably located around here, I believe. So it's not even known if that part of the verge will have to actually come up yet, but a translocation strategy is conditioned in the report to move that wild clary in sight if it's required to. And I think I noted that our wildlife officer has stated that it actually isn't a protected species as such, so it actually has no specific protection anyway, but obviously the Wildlife Trust do not want that species to disappear because it's not found quite regularly in Northamptonshire itself. Was there another point I'm trying to...
Yeah, I did mention about the flooding as well, but
yeah.
I would also want to talk. I noticed that in a lot of the objections from the residents about, there was mention of bats, but I didn't see anything in the bat survey. I didn't see a bat survey talks, because obviously the open fields there will be prime feeding ground for bats. I'm not sure what bat species there are. You might be able to answer that question. No. But of course, losing any area of land like this would have a big effect on, and I think in one of the objections it said there were 300 or so bat passes in one night. I'm not sure what survey data that is though, but I just wanted to mention that as well.
That's fine. Obviously, the ecological information we had put forward covered bats, and there was no objection from our ecologists on bats. And in terms of flooding and drainage, again, I'd have to refer back to our experts that have said it's fine in that regard.
Are there any other members wishing to speak?
Evening, Chair.
Councillor Riley.
Yeah, just a quick point from me, really. Sort of listen to everybody sort of asked questions that I was thinking anyway. Just in relation to sort of the Saxon area, which is adjacent to the development, what would happen if there was a find in that particular site, or potential find?
I believe if there's fines, they're recorded, essentially, so found, recorded. It's not an active obstacle to development. So it'll be found, there'll be records of those fines, and it'll be kind of covered over, as you find on quite a lot of developments across the country.
Thank you. So the officer recommendation as amended on the update sheet has been seconded. Can we go to the vote? All those in favour of approving the application? Can you have a show of hands, please? Is that 3? Can you put clear? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, can you repeat that, please?
Sorry. We're now moving to the vote. As per the officer recommendation, as in the update sheet, so there are a couple of conditions have been strengthened and one's been removed because it's already conditioned in the report. So the officer recommendation to approve the application has been moved and seconded. We're now going to the vote. Can you show clearly a show of hands, all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against? Any abstentions? Don't believe there are any abstentions. So that is carried. The officer's recommendation has been approved. Thank you everybody for your time this evening. That leads us on to any urgent items.
None, Chair.
That brings us to the close of the meeting. So thank you very much for attending this evening. Have a